Today in episode 31 of the podcast, we will be discussing the Russo Brothers and Robert Downey Jr. getting big paydays for their return to the MCU, and Keanu Reeves is headed to Broadway. We'll also break down the third season of The Bear and review the suspense thriller film Trap. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and welcome to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
Before we get into our news this week, we wanted to remind everybody we are in the last week of our merch giveaway. If you go to wbtp.link/giveaway, you can find out all the ways you can enter for a chance to win a free shirt of your own choosing from our merch store. We also have a gift card to the movie theater of your choice, as well as the Deadpool and Wolverine keychain that we showed you in the last episode. So go to wbtp.link/giveaway for all your ways to enter. The deadline is this Friday, August 9th. So as you're seeing this episode this week, August 9th is your last date to enter, and we will be announcing the winner next week.
Yeah, get those entries in for your chance to win. There's still a really good chance that you could be the winner if you enter now. And they said a bonus entry if you go on to our episode 30, our Deadpool and Wolverine. Just leave a comment telling us your favorite film of the year, and that gets you a bonus entry in to win.
Yeah, looking forward to everybody entering and announcing that winner next week. So jumping into our news now. Netflix announced that Squid Games Season 3 will be the last season that's coming in 2025. We got a release date for Season 2 finally. It's dropping on December 26th, but next year is going to be the finale for Squid Game. It's getting a third season, dropping in 2025, and that leaves two really big shows for Netflix that are ending next year.
It's kind of interesting they already announced kind of the end of it. I mean, you don't know how long being kind of a horror kind of franchise here, if it's going to last for a very long time, or if they want to end it before it goes too far, because there's only so many times you could potentially go back to this well, but you kind of thought that about Saw and other things too, and it's at 476. So,
yeah, right. Keep making them.
But yeah, it's interesting. They showed off the trailer for season 2, which it looks good. Dropping at the very end of the year, so you're not going to be able to, potentially binge it all before the end of the year. You only got about 5 days to try to binge it all. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see that season 3 is going to be the end. So you got Stranger Things, you've got Squid Game, all ending in 2025. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, it's not insignificant either. I know Stranger Things is one that everybody's looking forward to. Squid Games as well. That one of being the show that I think kind of took a lot of people by surprise at how popular it got. I mean, it came out in the middle of the pandemic and it just kind of blew up. It was one of those, it was a good time for Netflix around then with Tiger King blowing up like it did. And Squid Games was one that kind of took everybody by surprise with how many people actually enjoyed it. I know it spurned off some reality competitions based on it too. And just crazy to see how successful and popular that became. But it looks like they are wrapping it up fairly quickly with season 3. I think it's probably a good place for it, but who knows? I mean, by the end of season 3, people could want it to stick around, and we'll see how they end it. But yeah, that's definitely one that I think everybody's looking forward to at the end of the year. But yeah, it's one that I'm not personally the biggest fan of, but I see why people like it. But it's going to be a wild year for Netflix next year with those two big shows ending, because that's a big audience that it's going to lose a couple really popular shows.
Yeah, and we also kind of we don't know when it's coming out, is the English-American version of the Squid Game that's in development. That we'll see exactly when that comes out and how it goes. I wouldn't see that trying to run at the same time as season 3, so maybe that's something as maybe 2026 that we see that. So maybe they continue the kind of American reboot of it for a little bit, and that kind of keeps it going. And we don't even know if they're going to bring back that reality show or not. It was entertaining enough. Sure. It would have been interesting if they did do a second season. They did it before season 2 came out, so the contestants really aren't aware of the new games and everything else, because they mixed in some new and original stuff into the reality series, but they did redo a lot of the stuff that was in the first season, so people were very aware of what they needed to do. So yeah, if they were to continue the reality show, I do hope they had some surprises and they're not able to see the second or third season before they film that. Yeah,
it's kind of hard to have a real competition when you have months to prepare for knowing kind of what you're getting into. And like I said, they tried to throw a couple wrinkles in, but it it felt like everybody kind of knew what they were doing and could prepare for it. I do like that aspect of kind of more going in blind and not knowing what to expect, and just kind of I think that makes for more interesting television. But yeah, we'll see with the English version and the American versions of it, and see if it's any different or if it takes off or it kind of falls off because it's not the original. You see that with other shows that sometimes you get like an American version of a British show or vice versa, and it doesn't quite hit the same. I know a lot of people are divided on the British Office versus the Office, that kind of thing. So we'll see if it actually takes off or not.
Yes, I mean, what the British Office was 2 to 3 seasons, while the American Office ended up going 10.
Yeah, it was a long time.
So, yeah, we'll see how it goes and see how Squid Game wraps up and see what kind of story we have to finish telling here. Because, I don't think they were really planning to be more than one season when they originally did it, and it blew up. And now we've got season 2 and 3. So hopefully they can put together something decent out of that.
Yeah, looking forward to checking it out.
So, of course, last week we talked about the news that the Russo brothers were returning to the MCU along with Robert Downey Jr. playing Doctor Doom. Well, we got a little bit more information about the deals that got signed to get them back, and they are getting paid. So the Russo brothers reportedly will make over $80 million to do both of the Avengers films here, but apparently Robert Downey Jr. is going to make much more than that. Like, they didn't give a solid number for his, but I think he's already made $500-600 million off of his MCU role before with Tony Stark and Iron Man. He's apparently going to be making probably 100 plus on this one. Plus he also gets a private jet and private security in his own trailer compound. But we now know also the main reason the Russo brothers have come back is Robert Downey Jr. asked for it. Like, he said he wouldn't return to do the Victor Von Doom stuff unless it was a Russo brothers behind it.
Yeah, and I mean, those guys are, it's funny talking about their money, but these guys are literally money when they're together, right? And Robert Downey Jr. is one of my favorite examples when we talk about betting on yourself and betting big on yourself. So if you don't know anything about the deal that Robert Downey Jr. signed when he took on the role of Tony Stark, was he didn't make like a set number like you hear actors making a specific price. Like, this guy makes $20 million to appear in a movie. He bet... Don't get me wrong, he makes a salary, but I believe he built in a percentage of the box office into his contract. So if a movie made X amount of money, he would make X amount of money, right? So he got that percentage based on, and then with these films just blowing up and skyrocketing and becoming as big as they were, making billions of dollars, his piece of that pie was significantly huger than literally everybody else's. And it's an incredible bet on yourself story because he could have just as easily... had that flat rate like everyone else does, and he's going to make his money regardless of whether the film makes money or not. But he bet on the popularity and how good these films were going to be and how well they were going to do it. Smart business strategy for himself, because he raked in the money for his time so far. Yeah, especially being the first MCU film with Iron Man, he had that opportunity to kind of negotiate and figure out what he wanted to do, and making that bet. All right, I'll take a percentage of all of this, and like I said, $500-600 million plus is what he's brought in so far from, and we assume there's probably a percentage cut from the next two Avengers, because right now it sounds like for the Russos and Robert Downey Jr., it's for these two films, and they probably don't want to give away their hand as well, but it seems like everything is banking on these two Avengers films, which, I mean, just getting Robert back, and there's still some people who are hating it, that it's hurting the legacy and everything else, but we just got to see what they do with it. Like, it could be really interesting. We do have variants in the, multiverse timeline now, but we also have comic stories where Doom has become Iron Man has become Doom. We have quite a bit there that they could play with, and they could go into a regular Victor Von Doom storyline after that with a new actor or something like that. Like, with the multiverse story right now, they have a lot of different options they can play with, and with kind of how the phases have been going and everything with Jonathan Majors Kang and all that, it feels like they're trying to bank on doing something big here and maybe doing something different after that, moving on. Yeah, you bring up an interesting point too, because I've heard it from both sides of the fence when it comes to like this type of casting. There are people that do feel that way, that him coming back in a different role is kind of minimizing the epic conclusion that Tony Stark got in Endgame, which we're not spoiling anything by now. I think everybody in the world's seen the movie, save for like a handful of people. But I get the whole wanting to preserve the legacy of such a great character and everything like that. But I like to think of it in terms of the optimistic side of it, in the sense that, there are a lot of people consider the multiverse like lazy writing. Like, it's just a cheap way to, you can't really, their excuse is you can't kill anybody off, right? You can't really kill anybody off because you can bring them back through some lazy loophole in a story, which that's one way of viewing it, but I like to view it in, it gives you so many more creative opportunities to tell different stories in a way that are, fun, engaging, and creative, right? Like doing the whole variant. Is he a variant of Tony Stark? Is he, what? We don't know because we haven't gotten the story that they're telling yet, but I like to think that there's also the possibility to have really fun, creative stories that we could talk about and enjoy. And I'm hoping that we get, something that makes sense, while also respecting the fact that, okay, this Tony Stark on this timeline that we've known this entire time, it's not like it's erasing under his, it hadn't happened. Like, this is taking place on a different timeline. And I think movies like Doctor Strange and Deadpool and Wolverine have really kind of opened the door to allow for those types of stories to be told.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Deadpool and Wolverine because, the main Wolverine we have in there is one who's let his entire world down. Like, everyone is dead. He is sulking and down on himself, and he's not the same Logan that we had that ended brilliantly in Logan and stuff. And, of course, they jokingly, playfully played off of all of that. But, we got a different one that gave some heart and drama and gave us Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, but in a different way, and it worked so well. And, if they take that type of care, even though it's going to be a different type of care than Deadpool and Wolverine because it's, slapstick and joking and poking fun at Logan and every other variant. Sure. But, if they stick to doing something very dramatic and heartfelt when it comes to doing RDJ as Doctor Doom, because you could play off with, finally taking the mask off and, Tom Holland Spider-Man thinks it's Tony Stark, but it's not. It's, he looks like him, but he's not him. There's a lot that you could play with that doesn't hurt the legacy, but you could really get some heartfelt, even give him some closure or something else on that. Like, there's a lot that they could play with this. And again, this could be one variant that we get, just like how many thousands of Kings we were going to have. This could be one variant, and we could, do the two movies and move on to a brand new Doctor Doom and do all the other Doom storylines after that.
Yeah, and I would love to see that be the case. And I kind of wanted to come back to it a little bit too, because I didn't give No Way Home its flowers too, because No Way Home kind of tells a very similar story, right? So like, you have this timeline's version of Spider-Man where companies like Oscorp don't exist, but if you go into another universe where, like, it's the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man universe where Oscorp is a big part of that storyline in that company, like, you can still get those stories. And I think people get so hung up on, okay, this is one linear thing that they're doing, and not willing to kind of open up and branch out and, take some risks and tell some stories that have also been told, and just kind of incorporating them into with things we've already seen. It's not an easy thing to do, especially when people are so used to looking at things with like blinders on, like tunnel vision, and just seeing one linear story through and through. Not to say that you can't always come back to it, veer off of it, and come back to it, because it feels like that's what they're doing. But it's a weird dynamic when it comes to like how people perceive like the stories that they're taking in. Like, it has to be linear and in like this fine box. It's I don't understand it, but I get why people view it through that prism, because a lot of ways we've been conditioned to look at things that way for such a long time. But I do like the branching out and coming back. It's
also really odd because a lot of them that are kind of not liking it or going off on is saying they're huge comic book fans. I mean, the multiverse has made this feel more comic book than ever, because the comic books have so many variants and differences with storylines and one-off stories that don't really touch, the other bigger universes, or we have the different worlds and the multiverses. Like, we're getting more now than ever into a cinematic comic book universe, because anything is possible. Bringing actors back, bringing characters. I mean, how many characters stay dead in the comics? Are always, they die off and they come back a little bit later, rebooted in something else. Like, we're getting more comic booky in the TV shows and movies now.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of us should want. Like, for those of you that don't actually read like comic books or anything, the multiverse isn't a new thing that's recently come up with. Like there's source material for this going back a long time, right? So there's these timeline stories they're not like a relatively new aspect of comic book storytelling. So it's not like they're just pulling this out of nowhere. Like it's not, like you said, there's so many different iterations, and when different writers and different comic creators do all these different story arcs for these characters, we know a lot of times the characters die in those stories, and they just show back up in a new story, and everybody has no problem accepting it there. Why can't we have the same in our movies, right? I totally get it, but I kind of want to like point an exclamation point on this with like one of my favorite conspiracy theories that I've heard so far about this. It's totally absurd, but I saw somebody literally say that Robert Downey Jr. is probably only going to be in the movie for 30 seconds before they actually pivot to who the real Kang is.
Or who the real Doom is?
Yeah, the real Doom is, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, with how much they're, as we're, started this news article about how much he's making, I would think that they're paying him a lot more than that, because I have a feeling we're going to get a brief teaser at the end of Fantastic Four, because I have a feeling he's going to be their Victor Von Doom in the Fantastic Four world in this multiverse, and he's going to be coming along the ride into the MCU and stuff, and then we have at least 2 films that he's confirmed in, so how much actual screen time? Now, that may be FaceTime 30 seconds, but I have a feeling they're going to maybe try to keep him in the mask and the costume for quite a while, and the mask only comes off when they need that like dramatic punch that everybody learns who they're going up against this whole time is, well, they think it's Tony Stark, but it's someone else. And I just, how much money they're spending, that's a lot of money for 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, spoiler alert, in a lot of the Iron Man movies, he's not physically in it. When he's physically in his suit, most of the movie, he's not actually flying around and fighting and doing all those things. So I don't know. It made me laugh because I was like, that's really odd that you would think he's just going to be in there that quickly just for them to pivot to somebody else. But who knows, right? We haven't got the story, but I'm excited to see what they come up with, because that's a huge get for them, and they're banking on their bankability in a big way. So good on them for securing that back for themselves.
I did want to toss in here, because I don't know if you heard about it. We haven't discussed, because this week was a little rough for me. I ended up getting pneumonia. And so I've been out of it for a week now. But it seemed like Marvel somewhat revealed between the 2 Avengers films, pretty much anything that comes out is going to be set in Battleworld and set around Secret Wars and all that. If you don't know Battleworld or anything like that, check out all the Secret Wars stuff, get yourself prepped and ready. But that was a kind of a big revelation to go ahead and say. I don't know if you saw them say that, but it's like, that's pretty huge. So like, what are we actually going to get in between there? Are we going to have maybe a series in between that's all Battleworld and stuff, and then we go into the movies? Because what they could release in between those is going to be really significant to what happens in Secret Wars.
Yeah, they got to set up a reason for them going there, right? So it can't all happen in the film. If there's going to be so much in the film, they're going to have to tell. So naturally, there's got to be something to bridge the gap, right? So does, Doomsday lead in? Doomsday is supposed to lead into Secret Wars, but there is a gap of a year in between there where we don't know what's coming yet, right? So it makes sense, but yeah, that's going to be so much fun, man. I am a huge fan of the Secret Wars comic book story arc. It's so good, so well done. It's like Endgame on steroids. If you've ever read the story, it's almost every single Marvel hero and villain on this planet fighting, and it's a lot of fun. It's going to be fan service left and right, I can imagine, much like Endgame was, much like Deadpool and Wolverine was, on a significantly higher scale. And it's something I've looked forward to a long time. And I know we talked about it last week, how my favorite thing from the time we went to Comic-Con was the Russo brothers saying the one thing that would bring them back to Marvel was doing Secret Wars. And now they're back doing Secret Wars. So I'm so happy that this is like come full circle for us, and we're going to finally get this story that's such a big deal, that I love that this could like put an exclamation point on this version of the MCU, to where the next phase beyond that really seems like it's going to be focused on Fantastic Four and mutants, which is another
heading to the mutant saga.
Another world is going to be so much fun, because I love the X-Men. I know you love X-Men. We've covered an X-Men series on this podcast so far, so excited for the future of a lot of the stories that they're going to be telling. But the Secret Wars is going to be so good. Not to like diminish anything that's coming out before it, but I've been looking forward to them doing this for so long, and the fact that we're actually going to get it is just crazy to me.
Yeah, because Doomsday really don't know exactly what storylines or story points are. There's so much with Doctor Doom they could be covering, and we don't know what Doctor Doom is going to be a part of with Fantastic Four. We figure if he's going to be a part of it, he's going to be a very small part just to kind of set it up, because the timing of announcing Robert Downey Jr. 3 days before Fantastic Four starts shooting is just like, all right, he's got to have some little part to do
Absolutely
with the Fantastic Four, even if it's just showing a cloaked version of him standing in front of a console or something and just going on from that. It might even be him in the costume, but yeah, just the timing of that and everything. I'm ready for the Fantastic Four, but I'm ready for these next 2 Avengers films.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big time for Marvel in the next couple of years. It feels like they're finally starting to get back on the right track, which is exciting for us because we love it so much, and obviously the world loves it because these films make a ton of money, and everybody's excited for. It feels like they finally got a little bit of a breath of fresh air with, Deadpool and Wolverine, that everybody's really starting to get excited about it. And maybe that we're past that, comic book fatigue that everybody's talked about the last couple of years. And we're about to go on another fun run of, movies and shows and stuff to, really engage with everybody and have everybody excited to, see these great things that are hopefully coming our way. So I'm definitely excited for that.
Oh, yeah. Definitely ready for the next phase of the MCU.
Absolutely. I wanted to move on to a show that you and I have both really enjoyed, and that's Invincible. So if you don't know what Invincible is, it is a comic books property created by Robert Kirkman, who is responsible for The Walking Dead most famously. They've had 2 seasons now out on Amazon. Very graphic, very violent comic. It's intense, but it's a really well-told story, and they've got several comics now, but Robert Kirkman kind of shed some light on how long he thinks the series is going to run. He thinks it's going to run for at least 7 to 8 seasons. Now, they're confirmed up to season 4, but it was kind of interesting to see that he landed on 7 to 8. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, it just seemed like he said 7 to 8 would get them to the end of the comic run based on their current pacing and everything with the show. But he also mentioned that it could go beyond that. If things are still going well between them and Amazon and the show is still doing good, they could make it last for a lot longer, because he even said he was surprised, The Walking Dead going 11 seasons and all these spinoffs and everything else that are happening. So, yeah, I mean, he just kind of mainly talking that this is kind of, if we were doing the entire comic run, 7 to 8 would get us to that finish line, but they could do more. I'm enjoying it so far. I haven't watched the second half of season 2 yet, just because there's been so much stuff to try to watch and catch up on, but it is a good series, and it's a bit different, kind of like The Boys. It's more of a boys animated in that way. Like it's graphic. It doesn't really pull a lot of punches. You don't exactly know what's going to happen with all these characters, and some interesting type cameo spots in there as well, because if you know the comics at all, they've mashed up with a few characters that you didn't exactly expect to see them because of not being aligned with Marvel or DC or anything like that, but they got some decent cameos to come into the series.
Yeah, and it's a good read. It's intense. It's intense stories and topics. It's very adult, like we said. It's it's graphic, it's violent, but in ways that, yeah, it could be a little much violent wise, but the stories are still really good, right? So it follows this kid who finds out that his dad's, this legendary superhero, but he doesn't have his powers yet, and he winds up eventually getting them, and that's kind of a bare basic minimum introduction to this, and how it takes off, and how his dad's actually an alien from another world, and all this other stuff. So it's a really good show. It's a really good story. It stars Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead, who plays the main character in Invincible. And, it's exciting to see that it could go that long. I start to get a little leery when you start talking about outpacing the source material, only because we see, and I hate to keep bringing it up and banging on this drum, but it hopefully doesn't go in a situation like Game of Thrones went, where you're outpacing the stories that have been written to try to create your own content to keep up with the popularity of something. I start to leery when they talk about that, because if you don't have this direct source material to you at least draw inspiration from, how good is the story going to be? Now, they are, like I said, they are renewed through season 4, but he sounds like they could get more seasons to fill this comic book run. But once you get beyond that, I don't know where the quality of storytelling is going to go.
And you also know that the gap between season 1 and 2 is pretty lengthy, and so they've been kind of working harder and cranking out more stuff so that season 3 is not going to be as big of a gap between 2 as 1 and 2 was. So we'll just have to see if they keep getting the renewals to be able to keep it on decent pace so we don't have a couple years in between, seasons like we did with season 1 and 2. But yeah, the Game of Thrones kind of made us all gun shy. That's why even when we talked about Shogun coming back for a second season and now a third, is that, it's not that we don't have faith in the writers because they adapted something so extremely well, but it's that gun shyness from Game of Thrones where they went beyond what was already written from the story and it just didn't work that well. And we don't want to see something that we've really enjoyed watching and loved watching go down that route of there's no more source material, we'll do our own stuff, and it just doesn't feel the same. Like, it doesn't mean they can't do it if they can do it right, but that's made us gun shy. We just don't know if they're able to take something that they're started out adapting and continue on with their own stuff well.
Yeah, it's not to say they're not quality writers or they don't do a good job of what they do. Obviously, they've given us something that we've really enjoyed so far. But, like you said, we get gun shy with that. And hopefully, we'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt and know that, hey, this is something you've already given us and we enjoy. Hopefully you can continue to do it, but we'll reserve judgment until we watch it, right? So still looking forward to them playing out the comics. If you've never read the comics, I recommend doing so. It's different. It's not your, typical Marvel or DC style comic books. Obviously, it's a different company that makes these comics, but I think if you enjoyed The Walking Dead, you would enjoy Robert Kirkman's style of writing. You'll enjoy Invincible too. It's definitely, from the same mind. So the tone and the pacing are very similar if you love those comics.
Yeah, like with most series, it seems when they get to seasons 5, 6, or 7, that's when you start kind of losing quality a little bit. And it doesn't really matter. Like even I think Smallville that I really like, 5, 6 was kind of a rough time. Walking Dead kind of when it got to 5, 6, 7, that was when it went down. I think there is a big pattern looking back at long-running shows, and when they get to that midway point is kind of where they struggle a little bit. So if he's talking 7 to 8, we'll see. And then they still have the source material going. Hopefully they can not have that big lull that almost every single series has when they get going that long.
Yeah, it's tough, but hopefully, hopefully they can keep it going in a way that is entertaining and high quality that we can continue to enjoy for many years to come.
Yep. Moving on, we've talked about AI quite a lot on here because it's important between video games and TV shows, internet, graphic design, just any aspect. AI is taking over and spreading, and now we've got Meta is apparently backing up the trucks to a lot of different celebrities from Dame Judi Dench, Awkwafina, Keegan-Michael Key, and others. They want to set up AI bots using their voices, and they're offering millions upon millions of dollars to get this. But so far, I haven't seen any of them have signed on yet. But it is, as we've talked about, as we're going to be getting here, a very interesting time because you're going to have more and more companies going after people to back up AI. I know I've seen Matthew McConaughey doing some Salesforce AI commercials. We have Al Michaels on the Paris Olympics has licensed his voice for an AI. So we're getting into that kind of weird time of we're going to see who has either been vocal or haven't talked about it. Are they going to stand behind not wanting to go forward with AI, or is the money going to talk enough to get some of these stars and actors to lend their voices and see what happens after that?
Yeah, it all depends on how they structure their deals, right? Or what they're actually getting paid to lend their voice to, right? Is it just for AI integration for, X, Y, and Z, but it's not for anything like movie or TV or anything like that. But if it's more for, how often did we say growing up that we would love to hear like a Morgan Freeman GPS type thing, or like a Samuel L. Jackson GPS voice navigating us to, where we were trying to go. But now you're pivoting to, the worry is that they're going to use their name, image, and likeness and then put them in whatever creative movie or TV show they want to do without them ever having to do it, but not having an opportunity to further capitalize on their name like that because they've signed like a one-time deal and in use in perpetuity? Is it time restrictive? Is it, limited to a certain thing, or is it forever we own the rights to your voice? Which is a very dangerous and slippery slope, because once you get certain people to sign on for it, then I think you start adding pressure for other people to do the same thing, and that's where it gets a little dicey for people. And I'm curious to see what these deals are looking like and what the intent is for it to be used for.
Yeah, you think these contracts, especially on the actors and actresses' sides, are gonna have to be very specific, getting down into the nitty gritty, because what would stop, if it's very loose of Meta to do their own only on Meta movies or TV shows using their voices, and like maybe they'll animate it using AI and use their voices with it, and they're like, wait, I didn't sign up for that. So yeah, you think that they're going to be, these first contracts are going to be very interesting to see how detailed they are on the limitations that they can give, because AI has such a widespread, like, watching the Olympics, I mean, every commercial break has been like Samsung AI, Google AI, this AI, that AI. And it's like, okay, we're getting beat over the head with it now. Like, they're really trying to expand this even more. And it has its good uses, but when you start getting into likenesses and voices and everything else is where you get into the really troublesome stuff. But also when they're trying to replace, maybe they're trying to replace artists with, AI created materials and all that. Like, it's still in that very kind of shaky time when it comes to AI and how it's going to be used and how they're going to license it going forward.
Yeah, we'll have to see what these deals look like, because we've been very vocal in our concern of what it's going to mean for creative people. I know we're concerned about, our friends that work in animation and work in video games, a lot of people getting laid off in the industry, having hard times finding new work. Is AI lending a part of that and like leading to less creative opportunities for people to pursue their passions and earn a living in what they want to do? Mm-hmm. And that's where we start to see this stuff. And, we'll continue to be vocal about, our support for, human beings being behind these creative things, using AI as a tool and not as a replacement for actual people. Like, that's the stance that we'll take, and we'll stand pretty firm on that. I have no problem declaring that. I think we're both in agreement. We try not to take too hard a stance on certain things, especially when it comes to this podcast, but that's something we're very big, strong advocates for. So, thinking of all of the people in those industries that are, struggling to find, work or getting laid off, and AI playing at least somewhat of a part in that. And, we'll continue to stand behind people that, are involved in creating these things from a human perspective,
Yep.
So I want to turn now to a much lighter topic, not to get all serious there, but moving on to another story. We had our review last week. You can go back and check out our review on Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 1. One of the storylines in that show, it deals with Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, finding out some things about Miyagi that's kind of questioning some of the things he's learned and who this man was. Did he really know him as well as he thought he did? The creators of Cobra Kai are discussing doing a potential Mr. Miyagi prequel series that's going to predate the Cobra Kai series and the Karate Kid movies, that maybe this is where this is coming from and where it's going to lead with this potential new announced thing that they're trying to get off the ground.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on it, just because when they went back to do Cobra Kai, they said they had no plans really to do anything to mess with Mr. Miyagi's legacy. Of course,
Sure.
Pat passed away many years ago, was very beloved by pretty much everybody for that role and most roles that he did. But, they said they weren't really going to mess or do much stuff with that legacy, because, the original came out in like 1983, I believe.
Yeah.
So to have the storyline in Cobra Kai come out about a troubled kind of youth for him, it was like, okay, now potential series. It could be good, but, it's just kind of see how does this affect the legacy of Mr. Miyagi? Like, he's a legendary character in the movieverse now after, so many years and so many movies and everything. I'm mixed on how I feel. I've really enjoyed Cobra Kai and stuff, but to go back and do a lot of stuff with Mr. Miyagi and setting in the past and before the Karate Kid movies and stuff, it could be hit or miss, because, of course, you've got to get an actor who can act well, but also try to pull off. Because, you know, the Mr. Miyagi voice and everything was a voice he did. That wasn't his normal voice or anything else. That was a character he created. So someone has to kind of imitate the voice and the character that he created to try to kind of continue this on.
Yeah, and I get having mixed emotions about it, but it's kind of a thread that's been pulled already. You know what I mean? Like, they've started it, they've started us down this potential rabbit hole. You could see the effect that it's having on Daniel in this season of Cobra Kai already, and who knows how it'll continue to play into the next two parts that are coming out. And you know, now it sounds like they're potentially going forward with it and kind of diving into it, because you do learn some things about a bit of his past that could be worth exploring. And that's not to say this is going to be like a long series or potentially or anything, but it could be an interesting story to tell. And I understand them saying they wanted to protect the legacy of, you know, the Mr. Miyagi character. And maybe in their way, they think this is still a way of doing so and kind of giving you a longer look back into how he became this beloved character that we love so much. Because when we get introduced to Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, he's already an older karate teacher. So he's got this long life that maybe they feel people want to know his real backstory and how he, you know, wound up becoming this, you know, karate master who takes on an apprentice like Daniel. And like, I think it could make for some very interesting stories that they could still do that would preserve that legacy. You just gotta, you know, you gotta see what they do with it. I personally feel that these guys have earned a little bit of benefit of the doubt for me because of how well they've done with Cobra Kai, and not really, in my opinion, they haven't done anything up to this point to really tarnish the Karate Kid legacy of the movies. Like, they've shown that they take really good care of keeping the tone of the show to match the films in a way that not a lot of people get to do or really pull off doing, and I think they've done really well. And if they sound like they want to take this on, I'm willing to at least let them try and see what it does. Now, at the end, obviously, if they do a bad job on it, we'll have very strong opinions about that when and if they do make it. So, yeah, I think in this case, they've definitely earned a little bit of, you know, benefit of the doubt from me to kind of tell this story, and we'll see if it winds up seeing the light of day or not.
I just hope for Cobra Kai's sake, they didn't open this thread just to set up the series and we don't get any sort of resolution to it, because it has, you said, it's changed Daniel. It's affected his trajectory in this final season. So there's got to be some sort of payoff to that.
Sure.
Like, you don't have to give away everything, but hopefully it's not just a thread that they open and we don't hear about it again until it goes into the regular season. Because especially with a lot of spinoffs they do, I mean, look at The Walking Dead. Andrew just kind of, as Rick, just disappeared. Like, it was just, oh, well, this episode's here, they're gone, and then you just have characters who just leave and are never seen again. So just, you wanted to not affect the main story of Cobra Kai just to be able to set up a spinoff.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But I think we're going to get that resolution for Daniel. I think he's going to come to terms that, you know, he may not be perfect, but he really is the man that he loved and respected, and that's who he is, and that's who he was, and that's the man that he became. What he did, and I'm hoping the lesson is what happened in your past doesn't have to define who you are in the future, kind of thing, which feels kind of like the story that they're going to go. I don't want to assume that's how they're going to end it, but in just the way my brain works, I think that's how the end of the road they're going to come up to, and then we can go back and kind of be like, okay, what led to all of this? Like you know Miyagi up to this point, and then you get this thread here at the end of Cobra Kai that's like, oh, maybe there's something worth diving into there, and I'm hoping you can have, you know, strong resolutions to both. That's
because there'd be potential of Kreese or some of the older characters kind of showing up maybe towards the end of it or something to tie into the bigger world. Because, you know, at least with the Cobra Kai season 6, we get that Mr. Miyagi was somewhat part of this big global karate tournament. So there's a lot of different, you know, Barnes parents, or you could just bring in a lot of legacy characters in there in a way, either their family, grandparents, or parents or something in there. So they could tie it into the overall world more too, and kind of see how all these worlds came together. It could be interesting. It was just, to me, it was how when they started Cobra Kai, it was like they didn't want to do anything to really touch or hurt Mr. Miyagi. And now it's a point of, all right, so the main series is ending up, now let's go to Mr. Miyagi.
Right. And I get where you're coming from there, but I think they're going to do it in a way that makes sense and will really tie everything together well. like I said, they've earned the benefit of the doubt for me, but we'll see even if this series winds up getting made, if it even happens. I have a feeling with how successful Cobra Kai has been, they're going to get the opportunity to do so, but we'll see what actually winds up coming of it.
Yeah, because this is one of the longest running Netflix series. I can't remember
6 seasons.
how many is most. 3 to 4 seasons have been the most that most season or series have gotten on Netflix. So for them to get 6 and a potential another spinoff and stuff, that Netflix definitely seemed. Well, I mean, it started on YouTube Red.
Yeah.
So I mean, it didn't exactly start at Netflix, but they've continued it on.
Yeah, they kept it going longer than anybody thought they would. But here we are in season 6, and we're at least for us, we're liking the show as much as we ever have.
Yeah. So I want to finish off on kind of a fun story. Yeah. So for our generation, Bill and Ted was a big movie, and we had, 2 of them. We just brought them back again not too long ago with some, it was a decently fun movie and stuff. But Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are re-teaming again, but not in a way I really thought that we were going to see. Sure. They're headed to Broadway. So they're doing a new Broadway production of Waiting for Godot. So they're playing the main 2 characters who are, having conversations and waiting for Godot to return. But to kind of have Bill and Ted back together doing a stage play for this play, which I've never seen this particular play and stuff. It could be really interesting to see how these 2 play off each other on Broadway.
Yeah, give me Keanu Reeves singing and dancing. We jokingly said put Keanu Reeves in anything and we'll watch it. I would love to go to Broadway to see this when it happens. I love Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter were a lot of fun together in the Bill and Ted movies. Alex Winter's gone on to do several other things as well. That's, he hasn't had the same, elevated movie career that Keanu Reeves has had, but he's done a lot of high quality acting and been in a lot of things that you probably don't recognize him in until you see, oh, he was also in that. Yeah, I remember that. That's actually pretty cool. But it's cool to see these guys come back, and you could tell how much fun they have when they're together and how good of a friends they are. And now they're doing, this Broadway show together that I'm excited to see what it looks like. And I would hope that we can go see them in it on Broadway. That would be fun. I would love to go to New York to see that, or wherever it winds up going. I'm assuming it's going to be in New York, obviously, but yeah, that's a cool story of them coming together for something like this, because it's a lot of fun, and I want to see Keanu Reeves singing and dancing.
And I don't know. I don't think there is any singing, dancing in this production stuff. So it's
on Broadway. You got to think it is.
Well, it depends. There's multiple different plays. That there's musicals and there's plays and there's stuff that's just outright. I don't think there might be, but I said I haven't seen this one. I think it's more talking, conversation stuff, but it could be interesting if we get anything that's more that we don't expect out of Keanu Reeves with it. Like I know the name, but I don't really know much about this. But this could also be another way. Like you're getting Bill and Ted to do a story that maybe not a whole lot of people know exactly how the play is done and everything else, and it gets them interested to go see because you have Bill and Ted back together to do it.
Yeah, and even if it's not singing and dancing, put singing and dancing in it for me, please. That's. I love a good musical anyway, but I'm not gonna act like I know what this story is, because I'm not familiar with this story at all. But it's Keanu Reeves. Like I said, you could put him in anything, and I'm there for.
Oh yeah, watch anything with Keanu Reeves.
Give me all of it, and just let's go have a good time and see him on Broadway. And it may not be a musical per se, but automatically when you say they're in Broadway, my mind goes to big musicals, stage musical theatrical performances, and I want all of that. So
now, if you said Keanu Reeves and Cats, that would have been a much different thing.
The Broadway show, not the movie.
Yeah,
very, very.
I still refuse to watch that movie.
Yeah, no desire.
I'll watch just about anything, but the trailers alone made me look like
I got about halfway through it and wanted those moments of my life back that I'll never get back. That was not good at all. I mean, at least they tried, but ooh. It gets this type of reaction for a reason. It was not good, but no, it's hopefully going to be fun, and I'm curious to see what that looks like when it comes out, and maybe we get the opportunity to go see it. I would love to take that opportunity to. I know you and I have talked to going back to New York for, other things that we enjoy, like doing another trip for baseball and all that kind of stuff. So. Maybe we can work it out and coincide with when they're there, and maybe get tickets to it and check it out. That would be awesome.
That would be really cool.
That's good. So now we want to move into our TV review of the week. We are reviewing The Bear Season 3. This is a show you and I both love a lot. It gets all of the love come Emmy time for good reason. It is such a fantastically written show. We just recently got Season 3, dropping all of the episodes at the same time on Hulu and FX. And this season really picks up pretty much directly after season 2 left off. So season 2 kind of leaves off with them deciding to move forward with this restaurant concept called The Bear. They finally come up with the name for it and call it The Bear. And it's this, he's trying to make this, beef sandwich shop into an elevated, high quality, high class, restaurant that operates on par with a lot of the restaurants that he's known for working from, because Carmy does come from the world of fine dining, and, he's a classically trained chef, and he wants to kind of elevate this family business to become that, to kind of save it and, make money and do kind of something meaningful. This is kind of a Cliff Notes version of the show in general, but it does pick up with them trying to get the restaurant off the ground, and it kind of goes from there. You get a little bit of the comedy, you get a lot of the drama. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite shows. It's because it's so smartly written and acted so well. There's a lot of guest actors that are in this show that are just fantastic as well. But the main cast in this show are so good.
Yeah, they play off each other so well. So yeah, we get Carmy has kind of determined that he's going after a star. He wants this to be a 1 Michelin star restaurant, but that also comes with a lot of problems and issues and everything else, because this season did give us a lot of flashbacks, so we went in the past a lot, so that was kind of mixed for me. Like I really loved and enjoyed the show, but there was much more time spent in the past than the present. Like the present was almost like footnotes at times when it came to what they're doing, because we start off right away that they're apologizing for how things ended at the last service and trying to get everyone back together, and they kind of bring out that they're going to do this partnership agreement, so everyone gets equal shares. This is what you're going to make. But at the same time, Carmy has these non-negotiables that become a very big part of this season. Is he's very strict on it has to be this way. And we also see a pretty big turn between him and Sid's relationship, because he's trying to grow and improve, but he is very much stuck in his ways. And we kind of see of his training more and how, Chef Fields treated him and everything else, that he's kind of reverting back a ways a little bit about being these big chefs that taught him, because he decides that, we're changing menu every single day. Well, this is supposed to be a partnership. He's supposed to be running all this by Sid and everything else. Every time she tried to butt in and say, well, maybe we could, no, we're going to do this. Well, should we, no, we're going to do this. Like
it's non-negotiable.
He became very strict and controlling over everything that they were doing at the restaurant. And we kind of see a side story with Sid that she's kind of not sure of what she's going to do moving forward with this restaurant.
Yeah, because she's got a little bit of a checkered past when it comes to, and I say checkered past like when it comes to like committing to, like a certain restaurant or doing a certain thing. She's been burned before, and kind of a unsuccessful business venture. That's something that she had started out for herself before, and is kind of wanting to learn from the best of the best. And she winds up, in previous seasons, like she's a fan of Carmy's, like she sees where he's come from, what he's done, and she wants to learn from under him. And they develop this really, really cool back and forth, I say up and down friendship, because it goes through its ups and its downs, right? They both want the same thing, but they have very different viewpoints on how to get there, right? There are a lot of things they're on the same page on, but a lot of the dynamic of their relationship and their friendship is getting on the same page is not always the easiest thing for him, because she does want to be successful in this with him, but a lot of the ways she's trying to get him to get out of his own way sometimes, and that's really a struggle for her, because she cares about Carmy and she wants this to do well, but at the same time she wants to have some say in it. She wants to, be this equal partner that she doesn't really feel like she's being treated, or, her input isn't as valued in a lot of things, but maybe outside of just the quality of the food that they're making, because he trusts her in that. But it seems like a lot of it, he is so controlling over every other aspect of this stuff. But it's where kind of the humor comes in, because he has control over it, but he's not fully cognizant of how everything works and how much everything costs to get this restaurant. A lot of it in this season is getting this restaurant just up to code to open and function, right?
Yeah, because we've got uncle is, really hammering down on costs and bringing in the character, the computer, who's going to go over their finances and figure out, which we also get a kind of deeper little storyline with him that we didn't get everything unraveled, but we see uncle's going through some kind of a rough part of his life too. So kind of everyone's trying to make this restaurant successful, but each of them are kind of fighting a different battle. Because, we got Richie on the side that he's got his ex-wife is looking to get remarried and stuff, but he's still kind of in love with her. Still kind of has that connection. Like, hey, it's... And, of course, we got a ton of cameos. So, of course, Josh Hartnett is his wife's new fiance and stuff. So we got some... But, there were so many different cameos from real chefs, but also many different actors. And, John Cena shows up. And we have just so many different cameos, which worked really well in it. Like, in some things, if you throw in too many cameos and too many different people, that it could maybe fall on its face or it just doesn't work out that well. But I think all the cameos in here works so very well. Like, it just, even going back into the past with the chefs, and you have everyone who shows up there, like, it's really well done when it comes to bringing in some either real chefs or some celebrities to play chefs or other parts of the business. Because, John Cena's episode was so much fun, of having him going back and forth with the Fact Brothers and everything else. Like, that was a really great dynamic for that episode when they're trying to deal with something serious. They're photographing food for, potential Chicago Tribune. This could make or break the restaurant. Like, this is the one review they're waiting on to see. Like, this could catapult them towards their one star, could mark the end of the business altogether. And that was one episode that we have John Cena's character show up, and you have them in the kitchen trying to figure stuff out. And like, there was a whole lot going on, but a lot of stuff went very quickly. Like, oh, we're getting this, so now we're doing a flashback, or we got this, now we got a flashback going on. And it was kind of a very quick season overall of how it felt, just because we had so much going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of open threads at the same time. But one of the things that I do really love about this show is, if you're into character development, you get a ton of that here, because you get, all of these characters have their own threads of things going on. You get deeper looks at almost all of them. Like, in parts of almost every episode, you get some kind of look into either how they came to work at the Bear, what's caused them to be, how they are. Like, a lot of our main characters get that character development, which I really enjoy, because it makes you care about the characters more, in my opinion. It really does. And that's one thing this show does a lot of good. And it feels, like you said, it feels very rushed, because it is kind of a finite amount of time. Like, you do see the restaurant opening, and they're starting to work through a lot of things, and it's causing a lot of stress with everybody. Like, the restaurant does open. They're kind of going through the motions of day-to-day running a restaurant, and some of the chaos that causes. You have to hire more people. You have to, if they're changing the menu every day, the stress that it comes from, the wait staff trying to remember the menu every day.
Trying to turn tables quicker so they can get more people in.
Trying to be more efficient and things like that, to kind of operate to where Carmy feels like they should be to get this Michelin star, right? So there's a lot of that character development that they do such a good job in. The cameos, like you mentioned. My personal favorite is Jamie Lee Curtis as their mom.
Oh yeah,
like, she is absolutely amazing. There's an episode in this season, towards the end of the season, where Carmi's sister is in traffic and her water breaks, or she starts going into labor, and she's calling everybody. She calls Carmy, she calls Sid, she even calls Richie. Like, she calls like as many people as she can before she finally lands on their mother, because they do have, this really, really, toxic family, situation where they don't really involve their mother in, like,
unless they have to.
Unless they have to, for obvious reasons. If you watch the show, you know why. And their mother's played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who's absolutely fantastic. We just mentioned in our previous episodes where they announced the Emmys, and she got her Emmy nomination for season 2. Yeah. So I was looking into that. So season 2 of The Bear is what was eligible for nominations for Emmys this year. If she doesn't win it for season 2, the appearance she makes, she better win it for season 3.
Yeah, that was a great episode. Her acting, the back and forth between Sugar and her mom with Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis's character was fantastic. They had such a great dynamic going between her crazy, compulsive, controlling, but also trying to be an actual mom, but also just, oh, can I get some ice chips? No, that's the mom asking and not the daughter. Like, she's asking for stuff for her, but she was just so good in that episode. Yeah, that is one of my favorite episodes as well.
Yeah, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the restaurant because nobody else in that is really in that episode but those two. And you see this kind of a little bit of healing and a little bit kind of coming to a little bit of an understanding with each other. Like, a lot of the episode is Jamie Lee Curtis's understanding, like, that, yeah, I wasn't your first choice or far from it to, be here with you in this moment, but, let's kind of try to fix some of these things in our relationship to where we can at least be on amicable terms, because she couldn't get a hold of Pete, obviously her husband, he
was out of town for a work thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that was leading up to him showing up finally, and then you get this really sweet moment between Pete and Jamie Lee Curtis at the end too, like, because if you know anything about Pete's an interesting character. He's very sensitive, and he tries to help, but he winds up making things worse a lot of times by trying to help. But there's a really sweet moment between those two as well. But the season progresses along to where they finally get this review, and you don't know the results of the review yet because that's kind of where the series leaves us on a cliffhanger by the end of it. But it's so well written. It's so well done. I could see where you would have some of an issue of, the pacing of it a little bit, or having a little too much exposition flashbacks. Like, I understand that, but I really think in a lot of ways it does service these characters well. In a normal season, I would probably have a bigger issue with it, but you're kind of getting all of this background info for these people that make you care more for them to be successful now. Now you see, well, how is this review, whether it's good or bad, going to lead into, where we go into the continuation of this story.
Yeah, because a lot of the flashbacks revolved around Carmy and his time of learning how to be a fine dining chef, and that all comes to a point at the end because the restaurant Ever is closing down for good. Yeah. So it kind of ends at the very end, the last episode, that we get them all, Carmy and all the chefs at work there and everybody coming together to have one final meal at this place, which is also where Richie, he trained there and had potentially some dynamic between him and some of those characters there. It was really fun and stuff. But that was an interesting episode because we have Carmy just kind of staring down, Chef Fields the whole time, and he finally confronts him, but it doesn't go as he thought it was because that guy did not back down. It was like, oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Wait, what? You made my life horrible. Like, wait, you're welcome for that. And it didn't go how he thought it was going to go. And, we saw maybe potential change because of that. He finally got his confrontation, but it wasn't exactly as he planned or thought it might go down by finally seeing this guy again. That's kind of changed his life, but also tortured him immensely throughout his whole training and everything else that went on.
Yeah, can I just say that the fact that they named this guy Chef Fields really strikes a nerve with me. He's played brilliantly by Joel McHale, by the way. Joel McHale is this chef that you see in previous seasons. He's kind of a jerk. Not kind of. He is a jerk. He's very militant with how he runs things. He's very snarky. He's very critical, very a lot. And he gets that confrontation with him. And like you said, he just doesn't care. He's like, well, you're obviously successful, so what I did worked.
Yeah, just never trust anybody with the name Fields.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. But no, it puts a kind of a punctuation on this season. Like, hey, he gets a little bit of, but that's the whole charm of the show is it doesn't always end in sunshine and rainbows and everything works out okay. It's a more practical way of writing this stuff, which I really appreciate, because it's not just golly, the story ends and everybody wins and everybody's happy. No, that's not the point of this show.
It feels more real.
It does. It feels very real. This is real things that happen to people. And part of Carmy's spiral in this season is all the pressure that he feels to make this successful, and he's seeing all of these successful restaurants around him closing for whatever reason, whether it's you know, for very real reasons that a lot of places close, like in real life. Like the pandemic hurt a ton of businesses.
Yep.
A lot of restaurants closed. A lot of places, you know, just couldn't sustain business even coming out of it like they were before it. Like it's a very real practical thing that was written into this show in a way that I appreciate, because it does feel more authentic. It does feel more real. Like these people have real problems, and it's not, you know, and it's told in such a way that's practical and it makes sense, and you really want to root for a lot of these guys. Like, I think the person that's had probably the biggest redemption arc in this entire series is Richie, and I never would have said that in season 1. And Richie's story is told so beautifully. Like, you really start pulling for this guy after you're just like, he kind of comes across as like this, just, you know, just this dumb, like, you know, blowhard that is just very set in his ways and very like hard-headed and stuff. And then you kind of peel back the layers of that onion a little bit more, and you're like, okay, now I see what kind of makes him tick a little bit, and what what he's all about and what his motivations are. And you're like, okay, I kind of relate to that, and I really root for him. So I'm excited to see how his, you know, character progresses through, because by the end of it, he's somebody that I'm definitely pulling for to, you know, get to some point of contentness and happiness in his life that he hasn't necessarily had.
And we talked about how Sid, she's kind of struggling on if she's going to sign this agreement and go through with it. But another part that plays with Ever shutting down, you know, one of the guys there offers her a new job. So it's better benefits. She's got a bigger role. She's going to have more control. So we didn't get resolution on it by the end of the season. So she's still kind of at the end of the season is, all right, do I stay with the Bear, sign this agreement and go, or do I go start a brand new restaurant with, you know, this guy that I kind of barely know, which I do know, but I barely know. Do I go forward? And she's stuck with not knowing, and she actually kind of has a panic attack, breakdown, anxiety attack at the end, just not knowing what she's going to do. And it adds an interesting dynamic. It did kind of feel like this was the first part of one. Like, it left us with a to be continued. Yeah. So, like, the next season is going to be very big to it, but it did feel like this is the first half of the season while we have the next half. And we had talked about they were supposed to do 3 and 4 back to back, but they didn't. But they did, because apparently they filmed like 18 and only 10 have aired. So it's like, okay, is that season 4 they filmed, or are we actually going to get a part 3 or another part to season 3? Because none of the other seasons that I can remember gave us a to be continued. This was the first one that gave us I mean, we know the story flows and continues on, but this was big, bold, to be continued.
Yeah, literal cliffhanger
at the end, like literal to be continued listed out in it. But I wanted to talk about one of my favorite episodes, and it was a flashback episode, and it was Tina's origin story. So this was one of my favorites. So, you know, we get that I think she was working in a chocolate factory. She'd been there for 15 years, and she ended up getting laid off. And we follow her journey that she's struggling in the more modern world, you know, after being somewhere 15 years, about getting anybody to pay attention, dealing with the younger kids who's not, you know, I loved her snapping at one of the kids behind the desk because looking at the computer, not wanting to listen to her, and she just goes off on him, and it's like, oh, okay. But also gives us a great dynamic by the end of that episode. She ends up with the original beef. She's only wanting to get, you know, a coffee, but Richie ends up giving her a sandwich, and you know, she's seeing the dynamic of everything's going there, and she goes in the back room and she just starts crying. And we get a great back and forth between Mikey, you know, John Bernthal returning as the brother, and Tina. And that was such a great, just heartfelt, person-to-person conversation. Like, when we talk about how real many of these episodes and stuff, that just felt so real of these two people who are, you know, Mikey's talking about his struggles, she's talking about hers, of having this real heart-to-heart, real moment with each other. And it was one of my favorite episodes of the season, because the actress for Tina did so fantastic, but it was that conversation between her and Mikey, and then him end up giving her the job that propelled her to where she is today. But it was just such a great episode and great dynamic back and forth between those two. And so, yeah, it's such a real conversation that they had.
But this is that character development that I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. This is the type of stuff that, everybody a lot of people tend to roll their eyes when it's like, oh, it's a flashback episode. How important is it to the story they're telling? But this is what this show does so well, is it gives you this It gives you this context for these people. It does advance the story, right? That's not minimalizing the story that they're trying to tell about the restaurant itself, but if you ever find yourself watching a show and you're like, why do I care about these people? This show does a perfect job of giving you reasons to care about them, because you see the very real things that these people are dealing with. That kind of puts them in the position of, okay, now I get why in season 1 I see why Tina was the way that she was. You know what I mean? Because she goes, in this episode, she goes through a lot of struggles, like you said, of having a ton of experience and having to start over and probably changing careers, which she wound up having to do, because, you know, she's not a young a young candidate for a job that, you know, it's something a lot of people really have issues with. Like, if you're ever in a job for a long time and you get laid off, trying to start over somewhere else it's hard.
Yeah, especially being an older, a minority person.
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of things that come into play there, and they do such a good job of in a short episode, because these episodes aren't more than 30 minutes. Like, they're very quick watches for the most part. A couple of the episodes go probably 40, 45 minutes that are longer, hour-long episodes on TV, but you know, most of these stories are told in 30 minutes, and you get a lot of punch and a lot of quality in these 30-minute episodes. And, you know, it gives such brilliant context to, you know, all of these characters, what they're about, what they've gone through in their lives to kind of get them to the point where you're introduced to them and moving forward. And that episode was so good, and I agree. It was one of my favorite episodes, too, because there was such that beautiful moment between her and Mike, you know, her and Michael, that, you know, you see now why she holds Michael in such high regard, that when you see him, and, you know, like, where that conflict between her and Carmi when he comes in at the beginning of season 1, and why they butt heads, and why they, you know, at least have some of that, you know, interpersonal conflict in the beginning, is because she held his brother in such high regard, and he's trying to make these changes to the restaurant that she's, you know, this restaurant gave her a chance at it starting over and giving her an opportunity to, you know, help provide for her family, you know, especially when the you know, the dynamics between her and her husband, you know, that you explore in that episode as well, like her trying to, you know, pay for things for, you know, her kid and, you know, things like that. And you see why she holds Michael on such high esteem as she does. And you wouldn't have that context without this type of flashback giving you that kind of peek behind the curtain, and you can start to kind of look at the bigger picture of the show that you're watching. And it's such a fun exploration, and I see why this show is as acclaimed as it does, because it's so smartly done. And like we said, it touches on things in a very practical way that makes sense. And people talk like you would normally hear people talking in real life. It doesn't feel like stilted dialogue or stuff that's kind of stiffly written between characters, and that you see in a lot of things. These feel very much like people you would run into if you go into a sandwich shop in the middle of a city, and you hear people talking like this, including, you know, all the language and all this other stuff. You know?
I don't know why this scene popped in my head while you were talking, but it was one of the Fact brothers, and I forget the name, but Carmi tells him that this soup is going to be served tableside. And so he, you know, he's not a guy who's into fine dining or anything else. He's been helping doing, you know, construction and stuff for the restaurant, and he's starting to try to help out in the front of the house. So he takes it out to the table, pours and does everything. Then he picks up the table and walks away with it and takes it back. And Carmi's like, why do you have this back in here? Like, get it back out there and everything. Like, and that felt very real because this is a guy, he doesn't know fine dining. Right. He's trying his best and knowing, but to him, what made sense of his upbringing and everything else that you see through, you know, the original beef and the flashbacks that we get with him was like, okay, it doesn't make much sense to me, but here, I'll pour it at the table and I'll take it back. Like, no, you're supposed to leave it at the table for him. And like, that was a great scene, but also felt very real to that character. Like, he wouldn't exactly know. He hasn't been trained to do it. They're just expecting him to go out and do it. And like, wait, what are you doing?
But you see where like Carmi's dealing with his own, you know, struggles and stresses and everything like that he kind of goes off. And I'm like, you should know this already. And he's just standing there like, what do you mean? This is what you told me to do. Like, he's like,
told me to pour it tableside. I did.
It was so funny. I love that scene because that is a real thing that you can see happen. People do screw up. Guess what? These guys go out and they drop plates and they do, you know, things like that. Very practical stuff that you wouldn't think doesn't always get fit, because you could write it like, oh, this restaurant's just operating highly efficiently and there are no problems and everything like that. But no, this is a very real take on how an actual restaurant works, and it's so fun, it's so funny, it's so smart. It's seriously more drama than it is comedy. I know we've touched on that and how they felt about the show. It's very more drama based than it is comedy based, but it does have some comic elements too, especially when the interactions, the conversations people have, and we're not going to cuss on here, but some of the back and forth that people have, like arguments, especially between Richie and Carmi, that are just so funny and juvenile, but in a way that you could see two people talking to each other. Yeah, that's how family argues, right? It's how people talk to each other, like, especially if they're really close and they're both, very strong-willed people that, they're going to go back and forth, and it's so good. All the actors do such a phenomenal job on this show. The writing is so good. You get why this show gets the accolades that it does, because it's so good. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it picks up in, after this cliffhanger, and seeing just where they go from here.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's, season 3 was another great season. It felt like it maybe could have used a few less flashbacks and more of the present, because there was a lot of drama going on, but it did in the end give enough time to give us the exposition and all the development and everything behind here. But the restaurant didn't have a whole lot of forward movement. Like, we dealt with one situation. They're trying to get the star, they're trying to get service up, they're trying to get reviews and get to this point. And that was kind of the lowest story told out of all of it. Everything else was developing these characters even more, which they did a fantastic job with. But it leaves a lot that I want to see happen in season 4. Like, maybe season 4 will be a little longer. We don't know, because they said, as we mentioned, 18 were filmed, 8 haven't been used yet. They still say they're going to film early next year to finish it. So is that finishing 2 episodes? Or are we going to get a much longer season? Because there seems like there's a lot of stories still to be told. And we don't know if a season 5 is going to happen yet. It's in talks, but season 4 could be the last. Or they could do a season 5 to wrap it up. It seems like maybe it's heading towards a conclusion here.
Sure.
But we also got very kind of little. We got the relationship going between Carmi and Claire. But we also did get a really funny moment where, without Carmi's knowledge, showing up at Claire's work with the brothers there and stuff, and they're trying to pitch and appeal to her, like, Carmi hasn't even talked to me and stuff. So that feels like that's probably going to be a bigger importance in the next season. Like, it started or continued it because, of course, we left, season 2 where he had kind of just gone off on her in his way, because he doesn't know how to, like, open up and say, I need you and I want you, and he pushes her away. And we didn't really get much, if any, resolution to that in season 3. So it feels like that's a story point that they kept open, and should hopefully have a resolution in season 4.
Yeah, because you want those two to wind up together. You see how much they actually do care about each other. And the funny one of them showing up and goes, listen, you're probably going to need to reach out to him, because we know Carmi, you know Carmi. He struggles with these sort of things. Like, if you really want this, like, we think that he's open to it too. Just, maybe you have to be the one to, extend that olive branch and reach out first. So hopefully we get that resolution as well. But like you said, it does feel in a lot of ways like it is half of a story, kind of opened here. And I know we had talked about before where they had all these episodes shot wasn't intended to be a front half and a back half of the same season, but it sounds like it could be a 3 and 4 situation. Now they could be wrapping it up, like you said, because, a lot of the cast in the show are going on and doing other, like, bigger things. Like, we jokingly talk about how Jeremy Allen White seems to be casting in almost everything lately. And you have, Yvonne shooting the Marvel stuff, that he's going to be the Thing in Fantastic Four. He's the guy who plays Richie, if you don't know.
And the next 2 Avengers films.
Yeah,
so,
he's going to be very busy with the MCU as well. And then I know Io is... she does one of the voices in Inside Out. She's got stuff taking off for her as well. Like, a lot of these people, for good reason, are going out and, branching out and doing bigger projects outside of television now. So I could see where they could potentially be wrapping this up at this point. And hopefully it's done in a way that's, we get a solid conclusion for everybody here. And who knows? We don't know if they'll get the quote unquote stereotypical happy ending that a lot of these characters in a lot of shows would get. You never know, because it's not really been that sort of thing for these guys up to this point. It's not, it's not a all's well that ends well kind of situation from this show.
Yeah, if you ever watched Shameless that had Jeremy Allen White in it's very similar to that in a way that it's not going to go typically as you expect. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows or end perfectly. Like it ends kind of broken, or kind of a broken mess. And the Bear is similar. It's not as broken as Shameless. Like Shameless was a very broken family and crazy family set in Chicago as well. Yep. So it's going to be interesting to see if do we get Carmy realizing his dream of getting the 1 star and having his own big restaurant here, or does it end up going back to being an original beef place and they just are happy with just being a little hole in the wall place that people come get a sandwich. Like it could go that route, and we just don't know. And especially there's a lot of threads that open up that leave a lot of questions on how this place could, move forward or end, because we're left with Carmy's phone of we got the Chicago Tribune review, and then we have the computer, and we have Uncle all blowing his phone up, but it's all hidden. Of course, the iPhone, you can have it not reveal any of your stuff until your face is scanned. So we've just got, we know who sent it, but we don't have any of the context. So we're left just like, all right, was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? Yep. And that's where we're left for season 4.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they take it off, from there. And hopefully it's a good review, but TBD, right? A lot of things have told us doesn't necessarily have to expect good things. Could it be a mixed review and they have to do some damage control? We don't know. There's a lot of things in play there, but we're curious to hear what your thoughts on The Bear Season 3 are. If you've watched it, leave a comment on this video. Tell me what some of your favorite moments from the show. Even this season, if you've watched it so far, but all the episodes for Season 3 are now available to watch on Hulu and FX, and we can't recommend this show enough.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it at all, go back, start from Season 1, Episode 1, and watch all of it. It's not a hard watch. It is a dark, dramatic comedy. It deals with some serious subjects, but everyone does their role so well, and it's a great series to watch. Absolutely. Moving on to our film review this week, we have the latest from M. Night Shyamalan with Trap. So this is a thriller suspense movie set around a concert. So the premise is that we have a serial killer who, through different means, they found out that he's going to be at this concert. So they've turned this concert into a trap. They're surrounding the building, police, FBI everywhere, and they're trying to set up to be able to catch this serial killer known as the Butcher. But unfortunately, we weren't big fans of this film in the end. Like M. Night, his films have been very hit or miss. Like,
sure, yeah.
There's some that have been great, and Signs and The Sixth Sense and everything like that is going to probably stand the test of time for what they did there, but many others have not fared as well. And he finances and does a lot of his own films that way, but this one was just a mess.
And calling it a mess is probably the best thing we can say about how the way this film goes. And I want to be honest with this. Before we really dive into this, we like to always preface our reviews, or at least try to explain that these are our opinions of this movie. Please go and see these films and form your own opinions. Don't just take what we say as like an indictment of a movie or a glowing review of the movie thinking you'll like it or you won't like it. Go see these films and form your own opinion. I'd love having conversations about this, and I really in particular love having conversations of people who view films differently than I do or we do. And it may not be my favorite movie, but you could go see it and it could be, your favorite thing. I don't necessarily think it's going to fit that for this movie, but it is a mess. The dialogue is not good. The dialogue in this film is not good. A lot of the ways that he's trying to go avoid being discovered by the FBI in this are some of the most absurd things I've ever seen in a film. It feels very lazily written and very like, oh, duh. Like, this isn't... the dialogue in it is just not good. And it's a shame, because the movie does star Josh Hartnett, who, we both appreciate his work in a lot of the things he's done. He's been out of Hollywood for a while until fairly recently, and he's kind of started to hopefully come back. I know some of the circumstances around his original exit from Hollywood weren't the best, dealing with, some of the over-the-top stalker type things that he had to deal with. So we've really been pulling for him to kind of come back and have a, happy and successful career making films. But this one did him no real favors in terms of, the way he talks, the way he acts. A lot of it just doesn't feel very practical for the situation that he finds himself in, which is a shame because the premise of this film, I think, is really good. Like it could
have been really interesting.
Yeah, like you have this serial killer who he's taking his daughter to see her favorite pop singer. That's the premise of the film. And like you said, the FBI set this trap because they are tipped off that he bought tickets to this concert, and they've been searching for him for several years at this point. Yeah,
but the problem lies in the police and the FBI are absolutely brain dead in this movie. Like, I'm saying it lightly. Like, you have all this, and we're going to have some light spoilers with it, or we're going to go with it. We're going to talk about it because we kind of got to go into the parts that made it not as much fun to us as well. Like, the premise overall could have been a lot of fun, just the execution was just so poor. Like, the suspense elements weren't there. Like, we're two guys who go to a lot of different concerts, and some parts of it feel like, have they ever gone to a concert? Like, the concession lines, there are none. There are no merch lines, and then the police, the staff, everybody has been briefed on what's going to be happening. Oh, but they're so willing just to talk to everybody, to talk to our, Josh Hartnett's character about anything. Like, what's going on with all the police? Oh, don't let them know I told you, but they're looking for this killer and this is a trap. And it's not just the staff, it's the police do the same thing. Like, he literally walks into a back secured room that you have to use a key card to get into, and there's a big police and FBI presence of them doing a whole talk about what they're looking for, what they're going to do. And he literally pushes his way through a group of police, even shoulder checking them at times. So I got to go check the coffee. And they just act like...
No red flags.
No red flag. They see no red flags at all, ever, with a guy who is constantly getting up and leaving the main show of a concert 20, 30 times, going in rooms that he shouldn't be in, on the roof, back rooms, everything else. No red flags on him whatsoever at any moment in time. And it's just like, I can do silly and goofy stuff. Like, even with horror, the Scream franchise is an over-the-top kind of campy. I really enjoy those. Sure. And I can do the campier, sillier, but this was just silly to just, like, you didn't care in the end of what was happening. I was more counting down the time that it was going to be over than caring about anything else. There was no twist. There was no interesting points of it. Like, it all was just kind of just roughly done. Like, the whole thing is that he's taking his daughter to see the favorite pop star, Lady Raven, which is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, who is actually a musician and putting out. She was fine. She sung really well. The concert on stage was done decently well, but it's the way just everybody else acted in this movie just made zero sense.
Yeah, and then it's the easiest way I could describe the film as well, because, like I said, the dialogue is just not good. It's not written in a way that real people talk to each other in a lot of ways, because it's such a stark contrast coming from talking about The Bear to talking about this, because you could really see just night and day in terms of style of writing, but it's so silly. Like, there's one point where he literally steals a police radio and an earpiece, and he's in the crowd with an earpiece in, and nobody notices, as much as they're canvassing this crowd, because you see him at certain points pulling random dudes out of the audience to interrogate them, and eventually it's like they get to the point where they find out that they're not going to let a single male leave this concert without being interviewed. Like, that's how desperate they are to find this guy, is like, they're going to screen every male. Well, this is where he's trying to come up with ways to avoid that, because I guess he's afraid that if he gets caught, he's going to spill the beans, even though he feels like he's this criminal mastermind, but he's so paranoid that I guess he feels like he can't have this conversation without being caught. Like, he couldn't, like, and I'm going to spoil a little bit, he literally could have just ditched his phone and lied, and he'd have been fine.
Yeah, like,
having seen the entire movie now, a lot of what would have gave him away was his cell phone, and he could have just ditched that somewhere and allowed himself to have a what I'm assuming is going to be like a 2-minute conversation with somebody, and he could have gotten cleared, and that would have been the end of the movie.
Yeah, because we'll end up finding out that they have a profile of him. So there was something that happened where they were left some clues at this kind of abandoned house that led them to know that he would be there, and they had some footage that showed, but the description of the suspect that he listened to from him was either an African-American male or was it a white guy, and he had a tattoo of this animal, which wasn't the animal he has a tattoo of. Like, there was nothing that they gave away in this film that would point to him being the guy. So he could have walked out of there without any problems. Like, get rid of his phone, and he could have walked out of there scot-free. So yeah, nothing had any consequence in this movie. Like, he was doing whatever he wanted, however he wanted. Like, this is a sold out concert, which he's able to just walk around and throw, cooking oil into a burner and turn the burner up without anybody knowing. And that he was able to take and do all these things with thousands of people around. And even like, towards the end, we kind of leave the concert in a certain way, and he ends up disguising himself to drive this limo, and the limo is surrounded by people because they believe it's Lady Raven and stuff, and she rolls down the window and says some stuff, which was very kind of just like, It was the energy out of it, which it should have been much more. Like, I don't want to give too much away, but there should have been much more energy and stuff behind that. Well,
the stakes were high.
The car ends up being completely surrounded, and he somehow is able to get out of all the gear he's in, stack stuff up in the driver's seat, put on some new clothes, get out of the car and disappear in the crowd without anybody pointing out that it was him based on what was being said from other people in the car. Like, it was just so ludicrous, but it also pointed out just how inept the police and the FBI were, because they're surrounded the car and they're looking and they're saying stuff, and then they just start firing.
Yeah, like, they have this expert profiler who is, it's a fun cameo from Haley Mills, who, if you remember Haley Mills from the original Parent Trap, like, she plays the FBI profiler in this one. It's kind of weird how they presented her. They made it feel like she was more integral to the story than she actually was. She was literally just an expert profiler that had enough to where she probably had an idea of how he was going to act, and she kind of spells it out. She's like, this, he's going to get paranoid, he's going to get desperate, he's going to start doing all these reckless things, and that's where I kind of lost it, because like you said, the whole thing should have been over when he threw the oil in that deep fryer at that concession stand, because if you're at a concession stand at a restaurant, or at a concert, those are long lines. And the fryer, for all intents and purposes, is right there in view of everyone. Yeah, nobody, like, this is what this guy has. He's got this jacket on. He looks like this. Like, they could have narrowed it down in like that, and he just gets away, gets up.
And most arenas have a ton of security cameras and other stuff to look at stuff. Nothing was seen anything. And as you mentioned with her as the FBI, she more felt like a narrator. Her parts were just to give exposition and talk about, all right, so now we know this stuff. Well, now he's getting scared and he's going to do this and that. So, well, now he's not going to do that because she is just saying everything for him. Like, she's basically coaching him through it, and we do get some, not exact supernatural, but it's more hallucination stuff involving his mother and everything else, but none of it really made sense or tied together, and it really did fall apart in the third act. Like, after we had left the concert and everything, how everybody acted, how Lady Raven acted, didn't make sense. How the family acted, how the police and the FBI acted, just everybody wasn't acting right. And again, we get to a point where he's surrounded in a house, and he cleans the house, empties the pantry, does some more stuff within like 5 seconds of the police surrounding the house, and he's able again to escape and more. And it's just everything that kept happening just made no logical sense. Like, how he could slip through and all this other stuff, just, it made no sense what they were doing at all at any point. Like, you didn't care about any of the characters, you didn't care about what was going on by the end. I was just ready to be done, because just nothing was nothing was done well. Nothing was really tied together well. Every character was acting so weird. It almost felt overall this was a movie to kind of hype up his daughter's music career more than tell a good story. Because going in, the premise sounded it could have been really interesting. But we have a movie about a serial killer that's supposed to be suspenseful and thriller that was none of that. And really him being a killer barely played a part of it other than the manhunt for him.
Yeah, and he shows some, psychopathic tendencies at times and in places where he feels like he's gotten so good at this that he's smart and he's, uncatchable and he's so careful and all of this stuff, which in a way that's probably the best explanation they gives as to how he's like, he kind of explains how he's able to get away with certain things and some of his thought processes and stuff like that. And that is fine. That makes sense. And I think the girl that plays his daughter in the movie does a fine job of playing the young teenage girl who's got a little bit of character in the sense that she's fighting with a couple of her friends at school that aren't really including her in anything, but now she's going and having a good time at this concert to kind of take her mind off things. And she does okay in that.
And that part of it was so silly too, because we had this other conflict with her and other kids that really had no payoff other than some really silly scene in the crowd of them, the mom and the daughter screaming at each other in the end. Like it served no purpose for the overall story. Like, especially at being at a big concert, you may run into people, but every time that he got up to go do something, he ran into her again. Like, that is just not believable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And there's the way they set this up is like there's such an obvious loophole for him to escape that they point out eventually, and he winds up making it happen, obviously, to get out the way that he gets out. And it's like, it's so silly because they have such a tight security around the building. He's looking for things, and he tries the obvious, let's just walk out one of these doors. Nope, it's surrounded. So it's just so lazily written that eventually it's like, here's the one way we tell you the one way he can get out. Now his whole focus is, how can I get there? And he gets to that point where he has the best access he can get, that he literally says, hey, when the concert's over, can we go right through here and go straight to a car? Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you can go backstage where all the FBI is set up and where, the talent is. You can just walk right out.
Yeah, walk right through and out that door, no problem. And I'm like, what? We both looked at each other and just shook our heads when we saw that.
We're just looking for a male that could be a serial killer, but we'll let you and your daughter walk right out the back.
Because you've been vetted already. You're fine.
But he hasn't been vetted. He does two small things.
Yeah, he gets vetted by one person who has no business vetting anybody other than allowing them to do the one thing they get to do.
Because he's the director of the movie and a cameo.
It's a cameo from M. Night Shyamalan himself.
So that's a spoiler, but at this point,
it's not a good film. It's really not. And it's a shame because, like we said, I like Josh Hartnett. I'm hoping he, this isn't going to springboard him into anything necessarily.
I don't think he was terrible, not to cut you off. I didn't think he was terrible in the movie, but there was times that he was way over the top. Yeah. At other times, he played that kind of OCD sociopath, psychotic guy pretty well. Like, it was kind of a mixed performance. At times, he was really good. At other times, it was like, oh, hey, look, there's a hole under the stage. Why don't we climb down and look for costumes? Like, wait, what?
Right. That's what I mean. Like, it didn't do him any favors, and that's what I mean by that. Because there are times, like you said, that he's doing fine and he does a decent job. He's making the most of what's really given to him. I think it's just a bad script.
Yeah,
I really do. I think this is just a case of a bad script and lazy writing that kind of sucks some of the joy out of the film of what could have been. Like, I think like I said, the idea of the film is a great concept for, a fun story to be told, and then it just kind of nosedives from there, man. It's just the way it was executed. People talking in a way that's not really feasible. One of my biggest things that took me out of it kind of early is they're at the front of this merch line. They're trying to buy a shirt for the girl, and there's another girl next to her that says, well, there's only one left. I want it. I was here first. And then they were just like, okay, let her have it. We'll come back and get another T-shirt later. And that leads to, the guy at the merch stand who winds up spilling the beans as to why they were there in the first place. He's like, oh, you guys seem like good people with good values. Why? Because they just politely let somebody have a shirt that they're automatically good people with good values. That's not something to base it off of to spill the whole plot of this movie. Like, nobody talks like that.
Especially when he comes back to get the shirt and he hasn't gone and gotten it yet. So Josh's character is like, well, can I come with you? Oh, sure, you can come into a secure access area because you said you were a firefighter and you did something nice. Like, yeah, I'll let you come back into a security area with me. Like, it just, nobody made sense in that. Like I said, it really fell apart in the third act. Like, this was almost a 2-hour movie, like an hour and 45 minutes. This could have been an hour and a half with what it gave us. Like, it just didn't give us a whole lot to warrant how many times it jumped away from the concert and all the stuff that happened. But yeah, the third act, the final part of it, is where it really fell apart because no one was acting right. And then, we get to the final conflict of it, and that made no sense of how it resolved. And then they allow him, a serial killer that they've been looking for 7 years, to do multiple things that made no sense that he would be allowed to do because, there's the bike in the yard, let me stand that up, or here comes my daughter, let me hug her. They would not be allowing that to happen because he is a serial killer that has killed multiple people and had somebody in restraints through this whole movie. That's stuff that's just not going to be allowed to happen, and it does so nonchalantly. Like, no one actually really cares who are going, they're surrounded by 20 police officers and FBI agents, and they're just allowing him to do whatever he wants. Like, it just made... In the end, none of it made sense or had any consequence, and no character really acted how a real person would really act in any of these situations. Like, no one felt... These all felt like caricatures of characters instead of characters that you could... Because it took me out of any suspense, out of any thriller elements. Like, even it's supposed to be about a serial killer, there was very little to none that really... tied to that in the end, other than a video of someone in restraints.
Yeah, you got no motivation of why he targeted the people that he targeted. It just felt very random. Like, no.
Yeah, like there was no information given on anything.
And it's a shame because, like I said, we wanted to go into this. We went into it with an open mind, as we do with every film we see. And we take the story as it's presented to us and form our opinions at that point.
Yeah, we were actually looking forward to going in because it seemed like an interesting premise.
Yeah, because we want to originally scheduling it to see it, but obviously with you feeling the way you felt all week, we delayed that to see it a little bit later. But we were still very much looking forward to seeing this movie before we reviewed it, and it definitely left us just kind of shaking our heads. And it's unfortunate because we try to find the good in things, and there are things that are decent about the film, but the bad way outweighs anything positive that happens in this film, and it just really took us both out of it, and it's disappointing because M. Night Shyamalan has had some really good films, and a lot of it feels lately like he keeps missing the mark. And having talks with some people before we recorded this, like, a lot of the feeling is some people were one extreme is like, I don't know why he's allowed to make movies anymore, that kind of thing. I don't begrudge anybody trying to make films or pursue their passions or anything, but yeah, this one just definitely missed the mark. It was, in my opinion, not a good movie. No. Please go see it and form your own opinion. If you think we're missing the mark or there's something we're not seeing in this movie that you really enjoyed, please come talk to us about it. We'd love to hear your opinion on it, as we would any other movie. Like, it doesn't have to be, we give a glowing review. You agree. We can talk about that and have fun.
I looked up people's reviews, and there's some people who really enjoyed it, and I'm curious to see kind of why and how, because I did not enjoy it at all. But that's going to be a lot of films. Like, not everyone's going to love everything the same way, and we do want you to film your own opinion. I would say, from how I felt about it, it might be one to wait until it gets streaming to see. If you really want to check it out and see it in theaters, go for a budget day or something like that. So maybe it's a little better on you. But this was one. There's very few movies where I feel like it was maybe a waste of money to go see, and this one was borderline on that. Like, it just, in the end, felt like, what did I just spend the last 2 hours watching? Like, there was no payoff. There was nothing that I felt good about either way, good or bad on it. Just felt like this was a waste of 2 hours. I mean, I hate to be that critical, but it was kind of that bad to me. Like, it was just one that just felt like a waste of time. But we do want you to go. If you had any interest at all, still go see it. Don't let us deter you. If you thought you may still enjoy it.
Sure. Yep.
But it was just something that just felt like it missed the mark in every possible way that it could.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. But, you know, I think we'll kind of leave it at there, because hopefully Josh Hartnett does continue to get more opportunities at more roles and has a successful career coming back into Hollywood. Like I said, the circumstances that surrounded his exit from Hollywood the first time were not the best. It's like, just be good people, guys. Mm-hmm. Like these people, at the end of the day, whether they make a good movie or a bad movie, they're still human beings. Like, don't be awful to people. This is not an indictment of them as people. It's just something creatively that they try to put out that we just didn't get enjoyment from. And you can kind of just leave it at that and move on, and, you know, not try to ruin anybody's lives, or, you know, just be good people. That's the easiest way I can say it. But that is Trap, and it is out in theaters now. So check it out if you would like to, and come back and tell us what you thought of it.
So coming up this week, we have the video game adaptation Borderlands in theaters, which this I'm still kind of mixed on. I've played the games, but I'm not a huge into the lore, and I haven't played all of them. But it's had a visual style and a comedy style and everything else. I'm curious to see how that works out, because they got Eli Roth, who is more of a darker horror person, to do a more action comedy. It's going to be interesting to see how that ends up turning out. We also have It Ends With Us, which is a Blake Lively film that is based on the very popular book series. And then we also have the horror film Cuckoo is going to be out in theater. So definitely a decent mix of films this week to check out, while Deadpool and Wolverine is still pulling in a ton of money and is still taking over. I think even with like something like Borderlands coming out, Deadpool and Wolverine still has a very strong control of screens right now.
Yeah, it's going to dominate the box office for a while, but these films coming out too. Borderlands, we are excited to check that one out, and it's got some big names attached to the cast with, you know, Cate Blanchett. It's also got Kevin Hart, and it's got Jack Black as, you know, lending his voice to the robot character in that movie. We're excited to check that one out. Slaptrap, yeah, thank you. And it's definitely one that we're going to look forward to seeing.
Yeah, on demand this week, so we have Despicable Me 4 out on August 6th, so you can go back in our archives to see how we felt about that one. Mm-hmm. We also have the Furiosa Black and Chrome edition, so they did the same thing with the last Mad Max film. They did a black and white version, which was pretty interesting and fun to see. That, along with Watchmen Chapter 1, which is a brand new CG animated Watchmen film. This is part 1 of 2, will be out on August 13th. Series-wise, we have the Umbrella Academy Season 4, which is the final season, on Netflix on August 8th. And we also have the brand new Tales of the Teenage Mutant Turtles. So this is what was announced when the new Seth Rogen Teenage Mutant Turtle films came out, that they were going to be doing video games, series, and another movie. So this is the first series from that. That'll be out on Paramount Plus on August 9th. So a decent mix there. So we've got a couple comic book properties, one live action that's ending, and another animated that's still kind of starting this expansion of this new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle world.
Yes, it's going to be fun to see how they bridge the gap between the movie and the next movie. Like you said, this is going to be kind of the in-between to kind of lead us from the movie to the TV show to the next movie. So excited to see how that story is going to play out on Paramount Plus. It's definitely one worth watching. But that is going to do it for this episode this week. Once again, we want to remind you to go to willbringthepopcorn.com/giveaway. Enter into our merch giveaway. You do have until August 9th to get that done. We'll announce that next week. But coming up next week on the show, we will be reviewing the new Batman animated series on Amazon called Batman the Caped Crusader. Season 1 is out now. They've dropped all of the episodes. You can watch it. We are going to review that entire season next week on the show. And we're also going to be reviewing the film Borderlands, another one that we're looking forward to watching. But until next time, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.